and welcome back to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I am your host, Leon Wolf, and we're delighted that you have decided to join us. Today is Thursday, May the 21st of 2015, and I am your host. I want to welcome back our normal panel of co-hosts. Neal Doing of the Federalist is with us as always. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon is here. Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk is here as well. Filling in for Scott Linscomb, who is on vacation again this week, we have Heather Wilhelm from Real Clear Politics, and we're glad that you were able to join us, Heather. And our guest host for tonight is going to be Brandon Finnigan from the Ace of Spades Decision Desk. Glad to have you with us, Brandon. So let's jump right into the news. Our first topic of conversation is going to be the mattress girl, Emma Solkowitz from Columbia University. Of course, Columbia had their graduation yesterday, and so this gives us an opportunity, I guess, to talk about this whole sad and sordid situation and what it means for society at large. And I'm going to go first to Heather because you had a great piece at Real Clear Politics today about this very issue. And one of the things that you wrote about is you said, look, one of the things that modern feminism is trying to do is to essentially empower women through making them all victims. I mean, how is that even supposed to work?
Yeah, the thing that I find the strangest about all of these stories, right? We had the UVA rape case, which turned out to be a massive hoax. And now the latest is Mattress Girl at Columbia. And what's so strange about it is, let's just say you're a feminist and you believe that Emma was raped. Nobody seems to care that she didn't go to the police. You know, she went to the police, didn't complete the police report because it was, quote, too draining. And she's getting feminist applause. And in my column I wrote, you know, if you really believe that 1 in 5 women is being raped on college campuses, where's the outrage, right? You know, feminists seem to enjoy hand-wringing rather than actually bringing alleged rapists to justice, which I think is so bizarre and, you know, the opposite of empowered. And that, of course, requires a thought experiment for you to believe the statistics that they toss around, which are highly questionable, but it's a crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean, if these two statistics are true, and of course the 1 in 5 statistic is pretty highly questionable on its face, and now the new one that they're touting about today is 37% of all women are raped in their freshman year alone. I mean, what father would responsibly send their daughter to college if those things were true? I mean, isn't that the message that's getting out there?
Well, the statistic with the 37% was it essentially said all women between the age of 14 and the end of their freshman year, 37% will be victims of rape or attempted rape. And I wrote in my column, that's like the Game of Thrones, you know? I mean, if that statistic is true, this is a terrifying world for women. And yet, all these feminists just seem to want to have a few more seminars and a few more surveys and not actually do anything about it. And I think that suggests, A, they don't really buy the statistic, and B, they don't really expect that much from women. It's kind of insulting, right? That they're just supposed to be these doormats to be in this horrible society rather than bringing these alleged perpetrators to justice. It's bizarre.
And you know, I understand that it's a little bit different, but it is bizarre to me. I mean, if you get shot in the arm and don't report it to the police until a year later, nothing is probably going to happen to your attacker in the absence of some fairly convincing evidence that they're going to bring up. And I think that
you will get a rap deal, though. You'll get to make like a cool hip-hop record.
Right, but in terms of actually getting vindication from the justice system, which is allegedly what you're after, you're going to have dim hopes. Brandon, we're going to go to you next. I'm sure you've seen the fake rape project, the hashtag fake rape, with the posters that were put up all around Columbia University that basically they said Pretty Little Liar, and they had a picture of Emma Solkowitz there. How do you feel about that particular art project and the ensuing kind of Twitter trolling campaign? You think that's effective or not effective?
I'll be honest, Leon, I really haven't been paying much attention to Twitter today. I've been getting my hands full with a 4-week-old. So, but I did see some of it. I saw that they had been posting it up around Washington. I think it was around Washington Square. Where were they making the posters up? Was it all around the campus down there at NYU, or? Because I was not following that today. I apologize.
It was in Morningside Heights in Columbia, near Columbia University.
Columbia University. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
Harlem, basically, in New York.
Okay, up near there. So, let me take a look.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, we'll come back to you with the.
Okay.
We'll come back to you with another question.
Okay. That's the
Neal,
one
what do
with
you
the
think
little.
about the fake rape campaign? What do you think? You think that's an effective thing that those people are doing with the posters there? And what do you think about the response of the students who are out there tweeting pictures of themselves ripping them down?
I approve of the posters. I actually think that women who accuse men falsely of rape should be publicly shamed, perhaps jailed. It's a serious allegation, and they use it in the two major cases that came up in the past year. They use it primarily to get back at a boy who didn't want to date them. In the case of Mattress Girl, she gave up the goods, and then he didn't want to commit, which is quite common among the young people these days, as I understand. There's no expectation of exclusivity. And she probably knew this going in. In fact, if you read her the young man's complaint and you read her text messages, it's pretty obvious that she's borderline psychotic and needs perhaps psychiatric care. She's certainly a liar. She's kind of pretty, so the poster was quite accurate, and I approve of it wholeheartedly. Now, as for the defenders of free speech and thought that were tearing down the posters, well, they'll probably get away with it, and they're going to go through most of their lives with their view challenged, which is just how our society is these days. I don't have much hope for them.
So, Jeff, let's go over to you. And I think that we've talked about this a little bit before we went on the air. You're not quite as comfortable with saying unequivocally that she's a liar, as Neal is, and as I think I am. Explain why you think that is.
Well, okay, here's the issue. I am deeply convinced, in my own personal sense, that she is a liar. And I think all the evidence, including the text messages revealed in the lawsuit, her subsequent behavior, a lot of the sort of self-aggrandizing behavior in public, and also the fact that I think many of us, frankly, in our personal lives have met people who are just a little bit sort of mentally off and, frankly, a little bit emotionally deranged like this. I believe that the man in this case, Jean-Paul Nungesser, I believe was his name, I think he's probably innocent. But here's the thing. I'm an attorney, and I come from an attorney's point of view. Leon, I know you can identify with this. If Scott were here, he could identify with it too. And we operate from a position of legal proof and epistemological proof. I know in my heart, I believe in my heart that she isn't telling the truth, but I don't know it. I can't know it. And all the text messages that you saw after the supposed event that happened, boy, it sure creates a very convincing story. All right, but it's not as impossible to square with this supposition that something real or traumatic actually happened as it might be with, for example, the Jackie case. Now, if you guys remember, you follow me on Twitter, I was really hard on this UVA rape thing. I thought there was a real story at first, and then as the details emerged, I became absolutely convinced that it was a complete fabrication. There's no possibility that anything that would happen to that girl, Jackie, whatever her name is true. Totally fabricated. There was a lot of good reporting done by the Washington Post and also by the Daily Caller that proved that it was a totally made-up story. This one, I suspect that it's a made-up story, but I can't know for sure, and there will always be that small part of my conscience that nags at me because I don't know, I'm born like that I can't get away with that. And I'm also not comfortable with this campaign simply because I don't know, it doesn't win anybody over. The kinds of people who this is guerrilla art. Who is convinced by this? When you put up the Pretty Little Liar things, the people who are walking along the way to their Columbia graduation, do they have a Damascene conversion like Paul or Saul on the road to Damascus? Do they suddenly become believers that it's Emma Solkowitz, she's a liar?
No. Hang on. I'm going to interject on that, and then Aaron has got something to say. But I'm going to interject on that. And if you read the Twitter feed, which I think is brilliant, that's not the point of it. It's not to say that this is legitimately not true. They say, oh, look, it's art. And that's the way that Emma Solkowitz has been able to essentially get away with this.
And that's what makes me believe that she's not being honest, is because she uses that dodge. And yeah,
exactly.
She faces every single alarm flag that I have. But there's that
Right.
part of me that still is just like, okay, every single 5 alarm like go on me is going off here. It seems so bogus, and yet, hey, you know, I mean, that's just the.
Okay, so
I
as
want
a
to be
lawyer,
sure. I want to be
as a lawyer,
epistemologically sure.
if you send a discovery request to the other side and they come back with these text messages, you have a come to Jesus meeting with your client and say, you have not told me the entire truth.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, that is what happened. So, Aaron, you're up. What do you got to say?
Well, you know, first of all, I want to commend Jeff on his ability to want to think that this lady is innocent and isn't lying and that she's telling the truth. Now, as a lawyer, I'm not one. As a lawyer, though, I would think that he would also want to make sure that we know that this guy is actually guilty of something. Because first and foremost, he's innocent until proven guilty in our system. And so far, nothing has been shown to actually prove him guilty of anything at all.
Aaron, as a lawyer, that's not how it works. If you're representing a client, you want to win your case. Just got to say
Well,
it.
but who are you representing? That, I mean, as a general statement, you want to see the law work in the most, you know, fair way and honest way. If the guy is innocent, even if you could feel for her all you want. His innocence outweighs how you feel about her. Okay, no matter what, or I mean, it should at least. Now, the other thing on the social media thing, for years we've been told, our side has been told, you got to meet people where they are. You got to message them where they are. This is street messaging. This is guerrilla messaging. This is where it's at. She's carrying a mattress to her graduation. Well, guess what? Everybody's going to know about it, and everybody's going to know why. And we're going to capture the message on it, and we're going to say why she's doing that, so that she can't.
You know that old line about how it's not the medium, it's the message. Well, I'm going to say that we've come to a point where it's actually becoming inverted. It's not. It's not the medium. It's the message. Okay, using that street argument that you're talking about. Yeah, that's effective to a point, but there are certain arguments, there are certain messages that are not going to be conveyed to that audience and to that demographic, even the Twitter viewership.
I think this taps into an anger that a lot of people are ignoring, and I say good on it. If it elevates this issue and actually makes it to where we don't have these people who are able to go out and absolutely lie about it and have everybody take it hook, line, and sinker and elevate it as something we have to have a national conversation about, that like Heather said before, where every woman is a potential rape victim on a college campus, yet nobody actually does anything about it. It's all BS. That's the point. We need to blow up the narrative, and I think this has done a good job of doing that.
I want to jump in here because I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that I actually think the posters are a terrible idea. It's weird because I think that calling her a liar plays right into the feminist victimhood complex, right? They're going to get back on their heels. They're going to get defensive. Where I think this is what I would love for feminists to do. Build a support network among women. Women, if you're raped, we're going to take it to the cops. We're going to get justice. Instead, of course, that's not what they're going to do because that's not what they're about. They're not really about empowering women. But I think what we need to do is call their bluff, right? Okay, a quarter of women are getting raped at college. Let's take it to the cops. Let's get justice. Let's do the right thing. We're serious about empowerment instead of just all this la la la. So I actually think the posters are going to just dig into that whole sort of complex that feminists have, right? It's not going to. I almost feel like you can get into it more subversively, saying, okay, fine, let's get justice. I think women shouldn't be rape victims, right? I think we all agree with that. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Well, I'll just say one more thing about the posters, and you may not like them, but I think they're going to be effective to a point. It's not the end of the message by any means. You take it and you open it up from there. It's just one vector that we have of attacking their narrative.
So I want to make a little bit of a distinction, and I understand what Heather is saying here, but I mean I take this back to kind of the story that I looked into with respect to Sabrina Erdely about the incident that happened on the military base, and in that case, the whole point of what I was looking at was not that we could say definitively this woman was a liar. It's just that she reported it, the proper steps were taken, and they just couldn't find any conclusive evidence. I do think there is a distinction to be drawn between that kind of case, which is regrettable, and this one in which I think the evidence really conclusively says that this was a made-up story, a maliciously made-up story. And I understand the point that Heather's making, but there's a part of me that says, we want to call a spade when something like this happens, and realize that there has to be some pushback. I mean, this is an actual guy. This is not just a story. There's an actual guy, Paul Noongesser, whose life has been destroyed by this woman, and I think that that's something that needs to be acknowledged. I want to go to Bill next, because Bill works for the Washington Free Beacon, and they're paid experts at the art of trolling. And one of the things that's come out as a result of this particular story is that it turns out that the woman in question, Emma Silkowitz, is now in the market apparently to sell this mattress that she has been carrying around for the last 2 or 3 years, Columbia University. So she's now graduated and she's going to sell the mattress. She says ridiculously that she hopes that a museum is going to buy it somewhere, as though that's a realistic expectation. I thought that you might have some ideas on who might better purchase it and what they might do with it after it would be purchased. Bill, what do you got?
Well, number one, I think the first person, the highest bidder on this, should actually be the legal team representing the man who she is accused of raping. I think it would be great if they just purchased the mattress outright and then analyzed it for DNA and made it a part of their lawsuit against Columbia University. I think that would be a great place to put it. And I think that posterity will look back at the sale of a mattress as, kind of the hallmark of the shaming era. I'm actually convinced that this is the best way to do it, is actually submit it into legal evidence. Number two, perhaps the NYPD, who she has refused to cooperate with, could put a few bids in, and they could purchase it and prove definitively that this whole thing is actually just a piece of art and is not actually the mattress that she, says that she was raped on. Because the beauty of that would be if it turns out that it's a fraud, it's like an Abraham Lincoln axe type thing. If you're carrying around a mattress that you say you've been raped on the entire time, and that's your senior thesis, and it turns out that you didn't even engage in sexual activity on it, doesn't that mean that Columbia University has to fail her? So that would be cool if Columbia could skirt around, since they're going to have to pay so much to this Noongesser guy. That could be great if they could at least revoke her degree because she lied about her art project. I think those would be the two bidders I want to see come out and win this prized, treasured art project. That would be it. That's not even trolling. That's just those are just like logical things I think any legal team should go to.
Bill, I'm kind of sad that you, out of all people, didn't mention that the most likely buyer has got to be Hillary, just in case.
Oh, wow. Wow. I did not think to go that far.
All right. So let's go back to Brandon. Brandon, I'm gonna read you something that was actually sent to me today from a friend of mine who pulled this graphic on Facebook, and I have it here on my phone. The graphic says a woman has a 1 in 262,365 chance of being killed by a shark in her lifetime. That very same lifetime, she has a 1 in 6 chance of being raped. 100 million sharks are culled annually in the name of unjustified threat to humans. When it comes to rape prosecution, only 16.3% of reported rapists are imprisoned. We're worried about the wrong predators. What it says, that's the message here. I mean, do you think that's the larger message that this particular narrative is trying to get across, which is that basically men are the most dangerous beings on the planet?
I mean, yeah, it folds into that whole narrative, and I think that, the amazing thing about the social justice warrior phenomenon that's happened is that, they love, these very same people 10 years ago loved to accuse the right of instilling fear about everything, or we're way too cautious or way too afraid of this, that, and the other thing. We're going to give up our liberties because of all these things, because these right-wingers keep telling us to be afraid of this, that, and the other. All the Republicans run on fear. What do you think they're doing right now? They're trying to exploit people's most personal fears, especially people who are at the youngest and most vulnerable, people who just turned 18, 19 years old, going into the education system. That's when they can get them in and get them wrapped up into all this stuff. And of course, they position themselves into such a way that it's like opposing what they supposedly are trying to fight against makes you look bad. Well, no one's for pro-rape, but they can just turn that argument around on Twitter saying, well, if you don't agree with us, well, you just want to keep perpetuating the culture. Never mind the statistic is BS. Never mind that what they're trying to peddle gets kind of very obnoxious and almost scary, like with that graphic where they're basically trying to say that men are the root of all evil here and we need to start going after men. I just find that really funny that the pendulum swings back and forth, and now these very same people who accuse the right of using every single ounce of terror to get their way is now doing the exact same thing, or trying to do the exact same thing. They're trying to attack civil liberties in a different direction. Then this speech will be an issue soon. We need to put limits on free speech, and then everything else. So I'm just kind of amused by all of it, and it seems like they're running out of steam because they're getting so desperate and so crazy and so loud that they're defeating themselves without even realizing it. I mean, when you have them basically shoving Hollywood producers and comedians off of Twitter and basically hounding them off of social media, there's going to be a pushback from the rest of the left. So I think I'll be stunned if this phenomenon continues for another 2 or 3 years, if it even continues the rest of this year.
Heather, coming back around to you, last question on this particular topic. Do you think that this particular rash of stories has helped or hurt basically the result that we want to have, which is for women to actually report rape to campus authorities? I mean, do you take this all in totality, the Columbia story, the UVA story, everything else that's gone along, and if these stories are helpful or hurtful to the, I think, policy that we want to all see, which is that rapes get reported and prosecuted?
You know, it's strange. They should be helpful, right? You would think in a rational, sane world that these stories would provide some clarity. But weirdly, feminists are just digging in. I mean, Jessica Valenti had a great story by great, I mean crazy, in The Guardian today about the new rape study, right? And she's just digging in and digging in. And so, to answer your question shortly, no, because there's this feminist cult that's sort of egging on these women to perceive themselves as victims, and I don't see it dying anytime soon. I don't know if you all saw, it's very depressing. Taylor Swift just signed on as a feminist, which I just find that so distressing. So I think the power of the movement's going to go for a while, and I think we have to be very smart about how to combat it.
All right, let's move on to our next topic. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk something that's a little bit more overtly political, and we're going to move on to 2016. Brandon, first question goes to you. For the 2016 GOP primary debates, of course, there's something like 19 official candidates. In the initial debate on Fox, per the Fox protocol that they released just yesterday, is that Fox is going to accept the top 10 candidates in the polls. If you look at their poll that they have conducted, presumably that's the one they're going to use, that would currently exclude, among others, Carly Fiorina, Bobby Jindal, Lindsey Graham, maybe we prefer that result, and John Kasich. Do you like this approach, or is there another one that you would favor in terms of kind of winnowing the field to a manageable degree for the initial GOP debates?
You know, for the first time in my life, I'm actually going to quote Rick Santorum on something positive. Santorum actually had a good point when he was asked about this very thing, and he explained that he was at 4% in the national polls when he won the Iowa caucus in 2012. So I think that Fox is running a risk at basically people who don't make it to the debate. We all view them as the fringe candidates, and whether that's a fair label or not, with a field as large as this is, if you're only going to take the top 10, there's going to be some really good candidates that get just simply left off, and that will never have a chance because they're not going to be given a national audience. You're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I think that the fact that Fox is going to go by their own polling, or are they going to go by an average of the Real Clear Politics poll? Are they going to factor in a margin of error? Because when you're talking about candidates that might get 5% and then another candidate only gets 4.5%, the 5% guy gets in, but the 4.5% person gets out. It's a silly thing. I think they should just do a bracket, run a few debates one-on-one with a few candidates, and then the following week pick the top 4 and have them debate. But that way everyone at least gets a fair shake.
Right, so I mean that's the reality of it, isn't it, Brandon? I mean, if you have a margin of error of 4 points, everybody under 4 points essentially, all of those results are statistical noise. Essentially, is what it has to be created. So there's essentially no difference between somebody who's polling at 4 in a given state like a Ted Cruz and somebody who's polling a 1 or a 2, like Rick Perry or Bobby Jindal. I mean, I don't think that it makes a tremendous amount of sense to exclude someone or include someone on that basis, but what's the other way to do it? I mean, and I'll go to Neal on this one. Do you think the CNN approach is better? I mean, essentially they're going to go kind of the way that Brandon is talking about here, not necessarily with a bracket, but they're going to take their top 10 and have a debate, and then they're going to take the bottom 10 and have a debate. I mean, is that the better approach? Or seems to me that... Go ahead.
You have to do something because we've got a bunch of idiots on the stage. You know, last time around we had Herman Cain just repeating 999 over and over again. You had Ron Paul, who was absolutely bonkers, though I guess he has his fans. And you know, you just have a bunch of people who are really just, they have no shot. It's not going to happen. They're there to make a point, sell a book, get a Fox News contract or what have you, raise their speaking fees. So we have to do something to kind of winnow the field and really focus on serious candidates and cut that signal to noise ratio. You really want to have people get more information and not just hear a bunch of you know, talking points recited for 2.5 minutes. So I don't have the answer. Obviously, if I did, I'd be working for the RNC. But I don't know how they did it in the past. That's a question I have. Is I don't feel like we had this many buffoons on the stage at one time in the past. Was that because of, say, privately sponsored debates? Where people could say we're only going to invite people like you know, Ronald Reagan and George Bush and whoever else was running that year. That's a question I have. Maybe one of the election guys can answer that one for me.
So Jeff, I mean, we've had these kind of controversies in the past. I mean, I think many of us who have been following politics for long enough can remember kind of the infamous Duncan Hunter moment when he was excluded from a presidential debate and wandered drunkenly onto the set of MSNBC when they were live on air and yelled at them, "I have one delegate! I have one delegate!" I mean, we all obviously look. We want to try to keep the jokers off the stage, but how do you make that determination if it's not the polls? I mean, and is that the right? I mean, look, we all talk about Ben Carson here on this show, but the reality is the guy's polling at 14%. I mean, do we exclude him because I think most people understand that he doesn't really have a chance of, in the end, winning the election? I mean, is it serving as a governor or as a senator? What's the criteria you'd use?
I absolutely understand the problem here. Because as we were just talking about in the comments, I literally just said the same thing. I said I wish somebody would just use their executive decision-making to exclude people like Ben Carson or Donald Trump, for that matter, who you could have just as easily have mentioned, who's a guy who's polling much higher. I mean, obviously he's not a serious candidate, okay? But he's got poll numbers that are based entirely upon his celebrity. So what can you do? If you make any sort of holistic, subjective assessment, there are people out there, including the candidates themselves, but also their partisans, who are going to shriek. They're going to shriek bloody murder at you. And so that's why they're doing this sort of cowardly thing. I mean, in one way or another, both networks are doing a cowardly safe decision. Fox is just saying, yeah, we're going to have 10 people on the stage, cut off. I'm not as broken up about that as some other people are, because I am, again, like Brandon, my friend here, I'm a brutal realist about what are the actual chances of a candidate winning the nomination, and believe me, that top 10 cutoff, that contains your GOP presidential nominee, no matter what else happens. You could have 4-hour debates, all 20, 30 nominees on stage. The top 10 is where that nominee is going to come out of. I'm not losing any sleep over it. But they just don't want to seem like they're biased, and that's why they can't do the obvious thing, which is cut off people who we don't like Ben Carson and Trump, but also people who we do like. Carly Fiorina. Everyone here knows she's not going to be the presidential nominee. Of course not. But on the other hand, we all recognize her objective value. She is going to end up one of the best possible Republican surrogates that we have to fight against Hillary Clinton. My God, she's good at it, all right? And she's, in any potential Republican administration, she would end up as an obvious cabinet member. She's not in that top 10 cutoff. She's not a serious nominee. Do you want to exclude her? She's the only woman in the race. Do you want to exclude Ben Carson? He's the only African American in the race. And these are the problems that these folks have to deal with, and I don't envy them. It's an embarrassment of riches, to be perfectly honest. We have too many good candidates, And so you have the clown car at the clown caboose. It's a train car. You have the really top candidates are in like the diner car, and then you have the caboose, which is where the not serious candidates are. We're gifted because it's not like 2012. Okay, Brandon is holding up something. Brandon is holding up his Pennsylvania message, which is, what will you do to win Pennsylvania? Every GOP candidate must answer the question, how are you going to win Pennsylvania? And I got to say, shifting gears, he is exactly right. There is no Republican who will become president this cycle or the next cycle without seriously trying to win Pennsylvania. And
also, I'm gonna say this. Carla Fiorina isn't my person to be president, but I think it's dangerous to be dismissive of her, especially this early. I think it's dangerous to be dismissive of any of the candidates this early. And one thing we need to remember: the top 10 right now isn't necessarily the top 10 when the debate time comes around. So,
Aaron,
hold on a second, Jeff, I let you roll for a minute, so quiet down for a second.
You're absolutely right.
Shut up, Jeff.
Yeah, so shut up. So, all this fretting and everything, a lot of it's just wasted time right now. People shouldn't be focused so much on the national polls either right now. People should be looking at what's happening on the ground in places like Iowa, places like Florida, places like New Hampshire, and people should be looking at the messages that are coming out and whether or not, as Brandon has suggested, whether or not these candidates have a plan for Pennsylvania. So I agree with him there. So I think it's stupid to be dismissive of anybody at this point, especially a female candidate who was a CEO, and actually she has run for something even if she lost. But I think she's saying a lot of things that are attractive to people who maybe didn't think Carly Fiorina would have been an attractive choice to them. So
it's a great point. When is the last time somebody who was really out of the top 5, much less the top 10, ever come out to take the nomination or even seriously threaten?
You know what, though, Jeff?
John Kerry? Wasn't John Kerry outside of the top 5?
In May of the year before the presidential primary's over. I mean, you got to think of what time we're at. Yeah, we've expanded the presidential primaries to where we're doing them nearly 2 years in advance. But I mean, you got to think of where we're at now in comparison to where we used to be.
And if you think about
at this point in 2007, 2008 cycle, John McCain was dead broke and had to fire his entire campaign staff. And he was polling outside of the top 5, and Rudy Giuliani was number 1, and he was gone 3 states in. So that there is something to be said for giving the underdogs a shot here, like Brandon was saying earlier.
And
not betting everything on
what happened there, I mean, Newt Gingrich came out of nowhere, almost 100% due to his debate performances to take a brief lead. Same thing, and I know, we just had some mockery of it, but same thing with Hurricane's debate performances. I mean, people liked what he was doing on stage. He came out of nowhere to take a brief lead. Now, they didn't get the nomination, but, they had their moment in the sun. So, Bill, what's the right avenue here? I mean, where do we, should we really try to narrow it down this stage to just the 4 or 5 people who we think have a realistic chance of actually getting the nomination, or do we try to make the field as big as possible for these debates and allow somebody to come out of nowhere and surprise the field?
Well, see, I think the Republican base can actually, the Republican Party has done a smart thing by trying to limit the amount of debates that we have this time around. What I would like to see is perhaps organizing in early primary states large crowded town halls in which every candidate can show up, and that will give them an early chance to kind of state their case, even if they're left off the national debates at first. I mean, if some guy is invited to a TV debate but is given stage time to debate other candidates in Iowa, say at some large state-based affair sponsored by the Republican Party, maybe televised, maybe not. If we can somehow make up for it that way and say they do much better in Iowa than expected, maybe they get to join the stage before New Hampshire for another debate. I feel like you can I guess have it both ways by doing something with all the candidates that are willing to by holding state-based events. And Brandon has a point, and I'm interested to hear what he thinks of my idea because I just made it up.
I actually like your idea a lot, but I would go in a different direction. I think
Mute him now.
The first four states are going to have enough attention. They're going to have enough press, enough media, enough show appearances by the candidates. I'm not interested, frankly, in seeing another town hall in Iowa, another town hall in New Hampshire. You know where I want to see people have a debate? Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida. Florida is one of the first four states, but the states that are going to determine the actual election, the real election, we don't do enough prep as a party for the general election. We're so focused on the primary, thinking that's all that matters right now, when really, without any ground game getting started now, we're not winning in next November. You have to start that stuff now. The general election campaign takes 2 years. It doesn't get done in 6 months. And you have to have a presence, and you have to get people excited in the places where it actually matters. Not in Iowa, not in New Hampshire. I know people get upset because those are technically swing states. They're worth 10 electoral votes. I'm more interested in actually winning an election instead of trying to piece together 270 votes again, which we know always fails. Because if that's your goal, you're never going to get it. So let's see some debates in some swing states.
Okay, that's a very good point. I'll concede that. Either that or we do trial by combat and just
I like that too.
Yeah, just shove them all in the pit.
Why don't we talk about changing the format of the debates? I mean, not necessarily combat, though I think that would be great for ratings, and we'd all enjoy seeing certain candidates die. So it's why don't we talk about that? Because we've got these debates that aren't debates. They're not in any way, shape, or form an actual exchange of ideas or a discussion or anything like that. They are a recitation. That's all they are. They get up there and they remind everybody what they could read on their website. You don't learn anything. You don't learn anything about how these guys react when they're challenged. You don't learn anything. Well, very rarely. I won't say you won't learn anything. There are a few moments when the moderators are overwhelmed by these people who want to be the leaders of the free world, and they are able to actually talk to one another and exchange ideas. But for the most part, it's boring. First off, there's really nothing much going on in these debates. So why don't we have more substantive debates that are structured around an actual exchange? That's a question.
And I think that an important part of that, Neal, would you agree, is some level of, and I know that the media would balk at this, but some level of clearance by the GOP for the questions they're going to be asked. I mean, look, every year we go through this charade of saying, look, we have some level of veto power over who the anchor of these debates is going to be, and it's always, in exchange for the media attention for whoever it is, we let them anchor some person who hasn't done something to piss us off yet, and they inevitably ask some stupid question out of left field that has absolutely nothing to do with anything GOP primary candidates care about. I mean, how can the GOP do something to kind of cut down on the inanity of this, of allowing the media essentially to use our debates to sabotage each and every one of our candidates who's on the stage?
I would say insist upon certain conditions. I think when it comes right down to it, these networks aren't going to turn down hosting a presidential primary debate. So if you say these are the conditions, we're going to have this moderator who's going to introduce the candidates, lay out the topic for the evening, and then go away, get off the stage. Stop making it a show that's about the moderator guiding the debate. No, it's not about that. It's about these gentlemen or ladies who want to be the president of the United States, laying out their vision. So let them do it. Let them do it, and let them get up there and screw up. Let them get up there and really be mean or nasty. Let them get out of their comfort zone. It involves a certain amount of risk, which I think is part of the problem. Is these candidates are extremely image conscious. They're not going to want to do that necessarily. So it's on both ends. We need to rein in the media, and we need to kind of goad our candidates and our Republican campaign leadership to kind of put things out there.
Heather, it's been a while since we've heard from you. We talked about the TPP last week. Elizabeth Warren is making some noise, saying that she might not support Hillary over the TPP. Obviously, look, we all know she's going to back Hillary if Hillary's the nominee. But do you get the sense, as I do, that what she's doing here is leaving open, at least publicly, the possibility that if Hillary continues to implode, she might jump in if she senses weakness? Or do you believe her that she's really and truly out for good?
Well, I'd say she's never out for good, right? I think she's had plenty of people whispering in her ear that this could be her destiny. And just moving back to the previous topic, I had a great idea. I think Donald Trump should moderate all the debates, which would be great television. It'd be very exciting. I could see Neal's face. But no, I mean, look, here's what impresses me about Hillary is it just doesn't seem to matter what she does. I mean, she could rob a bank and nobody would care, right? So on one hand, sure, maybe Elizabeth Warren thinks there's a chance that she could get in, but it astounds me every week. There's something new about Hillary and nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's going to be amazing. So I don't know, go ahead, Elizabeth Warren, yay, run Liz, run, but I don't know. I'm getting more cynical by the day. It's amazing.
All right, let's move on to Brandon. News today is that Mike Huckabee, of all people, is skipping the Iowa straw poll. Is it finally good and dead?
Hopefully this is the end of it. And it's interesting he's doing it because if anyone's going to be favored in that, it probably would be Mike Huckabee. So the fact that he's saying, you know what, this is a joke anyway, it's a clown show and I don't want any part in it. Mike Huckabee's saying that. He carries more weight. And it's always been a joke. It's never really been a good indicator of anything at all. And I'm hoping that it is dead. And I'm hoping that another state eventually gets more attention other than Iowa, because I think we're all tired of Iowa at this point now. Iowa and New Hampshire, neither of which have even voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 2000, and that was the first time since 92. So let another state have a crack at it, and hopefully this is the end of that thing.
What do you think is the right move, Brandon, in terms of the GOP primary schedule? I mean, is it the right thing to keep Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina up front? Because there is a legitimate argument for those three, right? I mean, Iowa and New Hampshire are swing states in different parts of the country, and South Carolina is a state in the heart of the GOP base. Or, I mean, what's the alternative? I mean, I threw out there the other day, we could just say, look, we take this in the order of the closest state in the last presidential election. That goes first. So Ohio goes first in 2016, followed by Florida, followed by, Virginia, on down the line. I mean, is that the right approach to take, or how would we change out the GOP primary calendar if you were doing it?
To be clear, you stole that from the NFL draft, right, Leon?
Exactly.
We should rotate it about in a way that it shows a mix of swing states, blue states, red states, because there's Republicans and donors in deep blue states, such as myself. There are, fanatical, God bless them, the real feet that work the machine of the party, the people who knock on the doors in the deep red states. So they should be represented too, and along with the swing states. But it should be mixed up every year. It shouldn't be the same states every cycle. It needs to change. And I think that if you were to hold more contests at once, at one time, I am actually for a shorter schedule where you have a ton of states at once. What it does, it drives out people who shouldn't even be in the campaign. And it shows that they have the ability and skill to win multiple states at once. They have the ability to set up a team to win an election, which is critical for a general election. Because it's not just about winning your base over and winning, getting the support and starting to form your own ideology going into the general election. That's not the point of just the primary. The point of the primary is to also prep the candidate for the general election. This doesn't mean, a lot of moderates take this to mean, oh, this means you need to make sure you don't get too conservative. That's not what it means. It means you need to show that you have the ability to build up the ground game, get your donors in place, get an ad team ready, get everything you need set to challenge the opposing party. The Democrats are likely going to spend $2 to $3 billion on this election. Regardless what they say right now, they're going to destroy us. Regardless how much we like to laugh at Hillary, they are going to destroy us if we are not serious about data, about getting out the vote, about going into these swing states as early as possible to start setting up offices. So I think that by shortening the schedule more, having more states at the time, puts a lot of pressure on these candidates. Do they really have what it takes to actually win? And they have to ask themselves that question a year in advance because they're going to have to prep for 5 or 6 states at one time. It shouldn't be one state a week. I'm thinking 5 or 6 states at once. It forces people to actually make the kind of decisions they need to make for a general election. and then maybe we might actually win one.
Well, and I definitely understand the appeal of that. I guess my counterpoint would be that it would be pretty much guarantee that the Jeb Bush of every election cycle would essentially win, because whoever comes into the first candidate, contest with sufficient money and resources to carry 5 or 6 major states at once, I mean, that's the end of the insurgent kind of grassroots candidacy, don't you think?
I don't think it is, because PACs have leveled the playing field. I mean, look at what Ted Cruz did within a week of his announcement, the money he managed to raise instantly, thanks to PACs and thanks to his organization. You can come up with an incredible amount of money and teams and everything you need to run an effective campaign, and with a lot less than what you needed to do 10 years ago. And, we've seen giant slayers even in the last election. I mean, if you have the right people with you to manage your campaign and who understand what matters for you to win your given election, then it won't always be the establishment guy. I mean, look, we all remember what happened in Virginia 7 last cycle, where Eric Cantor spent all this money, and a lot of money on stakes apparently, and David Bradholm had almost no money, but he hired people who were right out of college who understood what it took to win an election. Those are the people you hire. You get rid of all the rest of the consultants, and you get the people who are going to get you elected. That doesn't mean you have to cave and kiss the butt of an establishment person. You find another way to raise money another way to raise money from the grassroots. You can have an insurgency powered by people if they are smart and clever about connecting themselves and getting everything in place. We don't have to play by the rules of 10 years ago or even 5 years ago anymore.
So, Bill,
why can't you combine both of your guys' ideas and have kind of like the best of both worlds? Have that NFL draft style front-loaded and have like 6 or 7 states that are hardcore red or hardcore red to moderate red up front, and then have that winnowing process be the more, more establishment states or more rhino states, I guess some others would put it, going forward.
That's a good idea too. I like the idea of more at once, because it really shows you who really actually has what it takes to win.
Yeah. So, Bill, what do you think? I mean, look, the Iowa straw poll has come as kind of the brunt of a lot of well-justified jokes, I think, over the last number of years. But let's say that it kind of goes away, and this year is kind of the final death knell of the Iowa straw poll. I mean, is that a good thing? I mean, look, the reality is it raises a lot of money for the Iowa GOP, which is a state that is a swing state and has a lot of competitive races every year. I mean, is the benefit nationally to the end of this kind of public charade worth whatever financial impact it might have on a state party in a swing state?
I'm just as much an Iowa skeptic as everybody else. I think the straw poll is a joke. It's all about who can bring in the most buses. That determines who wins every year. I don't know. The Iowa straw poll has the look of a Charlie Rangel race when you get down to it, and I don't think you're ever going to shed that. And I guess to pretend that a gigantic fundraiser for the Iowa GOP should carry the weight that it does, I think is damaging. So I'm all about, people just ditching the straw poll en masse. I don't think it's worth it. I think it is a charade and a joke, and I'm not a fan of it.
And
no matter what the damage is at the state level, because the Iowa State GOP really, what have they done for us lately?
Well, they've gotten elected several senators and governors and representatives for one thing, but to me,
on the presidential level, when did
they last deliver the state for the presidency?
2004, and it was the first time since 1984. So they don't have a good record.
Exactly. Well, I mean, in what years did they deliver those senators and those governors? Were they presidential years?
Midterms.
No. Exactly. So,
but I mean, it's the state, regardless of that. I mean, look, it's the funding of the state party. I mean, that's part of the equation of winning these elections in the off. Money is a fungible asset. Can you spend it whatever cycle that you have it? But the point is well taken. I mean, to me, it was disappointing last cycle to see Tim Pawlenty. And Tim Pawlenty is not a guy who's completely without his failings, but he dropped out essentially because he had a disappointing finish in the Iowa straw poll. and then we have basically this cavalcade of clown candidates who, marches through first place because everybody's so dissatisfied with Mitt Romney. And I'm sure Tim Pawlenty's sitting at home going, the hell, I'm better than all these guys. So I hope that...
well, obviously not. I was a Pawlenty guy in 2012, and the most obvious thing to me in the world is this man didn't deserve to be president if he dropped out because he lost the straw poll. That's...
Right, so that's a bad decision.
You might as well say, hey, should we get rid of the CPAC straw poll? Because that has about as much... that's about as indicative of the national mood as the Iowa straw poll.
Frankly, I thought it was stunning when T-Paw dropped out with all of his charisma.
Come on, though. That's a fair
Wait,
point.
his dad
Rick
worked in a factory.
Rick Santorum had a turn to the front of the field. You can't tell me Tim Pawlenty wouldn't have done better than the people who came through and had no chance or credentials to win the election.
Can I just take a moment
so he's
to
a quitter.
criticize?
So who wants
It was
to
a
quit?
beautiful moment for some best.
Can I just take a moment to criticize the voters? Because the real people who ruined 2012 were the voters.
What would an episode of this show be without you insulting our audience, Neal?
Yes. Let me just take all of you watching. If you could just
Our audience doesn't vote.
I know, right? A lot of felons in the audience. But anyway, if you could just resign yourself to supporting the establishment or the guy that you don't like, okay, as your number 2 choice. Say, I'm going to go for my number 1, okay? I love this guy. I'm going to support him until he drops out. And then I'm going to go for the establishment guy, and I'm just going to throw it all behind him because you know what? Inevitability. I give up on my dreams. That's what you all have to do at home, okay? Go into that voting booth, give up on your dreams. It's not going to happen. So prepare yourself, and you'll be as happy and pleasant as I am, because that's how I got through 2012. I said, you know what? I like Rick Perry. I'm going to support Rick Perry. Rick Perry screwed up. I was like, okay, Mitt Romney, no problem. It's a suggestion.
Heather.
Suggestion.
Heather, the big news story of the last 24-hour cycle, at least for the people who are paying attention at this early in the game, is the actual legitimate filibuster by Rand Paul on the Senate floor. Do you think that filibuster helped or hurt his candidacy? I mean, does it reach anybody who he doesn't already have in his camp?
That's a great question. I think absolutely it has to help him, right? I mean, I've always seen... I have a little bit of a soft spot for Rand Paul, but I've always sort of seen him as a fringe candidate, right? I mean, he hits the sweet spot of a certain block of voters, but beyond that, I'm not quite sure. But I think that's got to help him, right? The NSA spying is incredibly unpopular. It shows he's a principled politician. It's a very dramatic moment. So I think it's got to help him, right? We'll see what happens, right? Does anybody know? Wasn't tonight the deadline for that? I mean, wasn't it, if something wasn't passed tonight, then the NSA portion of the Patriot Act is not funded? Does anybody have an update?
Yeah. Allegedly, I think it's Saturday, but I think it's allegedly they're going to shut it all down. Oh, we don't have the money, we're not going to do it. If you believe that to be true, I believe the deadline is Saturday.
Wait a second, Heather, you just said something in passing which I think is all too often just sort of glossed over, and I don't necessarily think it's true. You said that the NSA spying that Rand Paul spoke out against is, quote, incredibly unpopular. Is it really? Is it really? Or are we all of us, political commentators, politically aware, engaged? Are we living inside of a bubble? Because every single opinion poll that I have ever seen says the opposite, that honestly, as much as people might wish that the rest of the country would care, including even people like me who come from a background where I'm more inclined to be sympathetic to what the NSA is doing than maybe your normal libertarian bear. Most people, honestly, do not give a fuck, and nobody is willing to grant this point right now. And it's a little bit sad, perhaps, as to the state of our republic. But this is something that I've been coming to terms with recently when I've been thinking about Rand Paul, because he inspires me in the same way that I think he inspires you. When he got up and filibustered, I was talking about it the other day, like, I liked it. I liked how eloquently he talked about these issues, but nobody really cares. And I have to constantly remind myself about that, because I kind of care, but nobody else does. unless you are on Twitter, you're one of like the top 1,000 Twitter influencer type political people. Really? Are there that many people who get this exercised about it? That's something that, you put a person like Rand Paul up against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton said, I'm going to keep America safe. Believe me, that is still a winner. We are not paranoid enough yet about intrusions into privacy by the government for Rand Paul's message to really carry the day, even among young people. Young people just write it off and say, it's not my problem.
Hey, Leon, and you were wrong that the filibuster is not the story of the day. The story of the day is the fall of Anbar over in Iraq to ISIS.
You mean
Ramadi?
Ramadi? You mean
Ramadi is in Anbar province.
Okay, the entire province. Yeah,
we're going to talk about that. Yeah, I'm still on 2016.
No, I mean, you want to know why people don't care as much about the NSA monitoring program? It's because there are groups like ISIS out there overrunning the very, very territory that we lost so much blood conquering. And I mean, until we actually have security, steps like this are going to be necessary.
So that is a good segue, I think. Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, I was just going to interject, and both of those points are interesting because, Jeff, I'll agree with you. You're right. Most people aren't up at night over the NSA tapping their phones. You're absolutely right. Rand Paul supporters are, which is why I would think it would strengthen his, thing. But then back to ISIS, right? I mean, I guess the depressing thing, right, is you could say that about a whole lot of issues. It's amazing. Josh Earnest got out there in front of the press, and someone asked him how our strategy against ISIS is going, and he's like, oh, overall, it's going great. Meanwhile, they've got 50% of Syria. They're going into Libya. It's amazing. It's again that sort of feeling that nobody cares. So I'll back you up on that. I think that's right.
I want to just interject as well and back up Bill on this as not only do they not care, but ISIS. There was a poll out from Harvard the other week, basically showing that millennials they support by 60% boots on the ground to go after ISIS. So Rand Paul's base of people, millennials that are worried about national security, or not national security, but NSA spying on civilians. They're confronted with that grown-up choice now. Do we worry about security or do we worry about privacy, and how do we balance that? And I think it's a healthy thing for millennials to experience as they're coming out of college, and a lot of them coming back from the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. I think it's something that generation needs to go through and actually think about logically.
And here's what's interesting to me is that I like Rand Paul's fighting spirit. I like that the guy is willing to get up and stand and actually filibuster for 10 solid hours. It's curious to me that he does it over things like drone attacks, NSA spying, and not Cromnibus, not any of the spending fights, not any of the the pro-life things that he attests to be in favor. And I get that that's his niche, but what troubles me is that basically, to me, the way that I see the GOP winning this election in 2016 is if this becomes a national security election as opposed to an economic election. I think that that's realistically the GOP's best shot of winning it. And, and I think that's been true throughout history. I mean, if the things in the Middle East continue to essentially crumble as they are, as Bill pointed out, it realistically raises the Republicans' chance of winning. And if Rand Paul's the nominee, he's essentially against a lot of the things that people rely upon to make them feel better about the Republican Party. So we'll close off. I want to go to Brandon. What do you think the chances are as we head off in 2016 that this is going to become? What do you think the main issue is going to be? Do you think it's going to be a domestic policy election, or do you think it's going to be a foreign policy election?
Well, we always talk about foreign policy, a year before because it's whatever's going on in the world that affects things. And of course, going to the 2000s, you had a big issue with 9/11 and terrorism. But it almost always falls back on domestic issues eventually. What matters is what's going on in your home. And I think that if the Republicans are smart, they're going to go on like a 3-tier campaign about security. You have security abroad, security abroad. Sorry about the sirens. I don't live in exactly the nicest
As
area.
you're talking about security.
Exactly.
I just actually assumed they were driving. Brandon, I just assumed they were driving by you to arrest Chuck Johnson. That was my theory.
Yeah,
Brandon,
he
I
lives
assume
about
that's
10 miles away.
Baltimore.
But security abroad, security within the homeland, and security in your own home. Are you secure? Are you secure in your own job? Are you secure in your family? And then further out, is your state secure? Where you live, is it secure? Which brings up a lot of issues. What we saw in Baltimore, that fear has never left the suburbs of most of the major metropolitan areas. People have forgotten about it, which is why a lot of those suburbs have become so blue. But when you have events like what happened in Baltimore City and in St. Louis County come up, people do start to think about that in the back of their minds, and that could affect places like the Philadelphia Collar, the suburbs around Cleveland, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. And then, of course, then you have your foreign policy issues, everything going on with ISIS. You can make security into a three-pronged attack to attack the Democrats at, and that way, if any one thing falls out of the news cycle, you still have something else to fall back on. The problem in 2008 was that Republicans kind of picked, okay, we're still dealing with the war, so let's pick John McCain. When the economy went to complete crap and they turned to him in September, he just stared like a deer in headlights, and Obama zoomed past him. Now, McCain was not going to beat Obama at any point in 2008. We all now understand that. We want to pull the wool over our own eyes and say, oh, no, we had a chance. But really, with all the factors that was going in, with Bush's extreme unpopularity, with the economy starting to tank, and then with a 73-year-old man running against, the young hip Democrat, we didn't have a shot in hell. And that we need to acknowledge that. Now, there might be ways for us to play this game in the other way, because I don't know if you noticed, but the Democratic nominee is no spring chicken herself. In fact, she's the oldest serious nominee since 1980. Everyone gave Reagan crap for being so old. Hillary's only a few months younger than Reagan was. There's a smart way to play that, and there's a dumb way to play that. If you simply attack her for being old, because she's a woman, people can make fun of things. But if you simply remind people how old she is and how unhip she is, you can't sell that off to millennials that she's the hip, young, new thing, because she's not. Even if the Republican isn't exciting to them, they just don't vote.
Come on, Brandon. All the young people are just thrilled about finding a Scooby-Doo van to get in.
Well, I'm sure this little guy is, but unfortunately,
which was not even the name of the van. Not even the name of the van. It was the
mystery machine. Yeah.
The mystery machine. That's
How
right.
does nobody know? How am I the? Okay, well, you, Leon, you were old enough to see that when the show went on, and
I was
stoner, so that's why I know.
All right, guys, we're out of time. We're going to wrap up the show. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. I want to thank my panel members, Neal Doing of the Federalist, Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk, and F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. Thank you guys for your time as always. Thanks to our guests, Heather Wilhelm. Thank you for filling in for Scott, and Brandon Finnigan of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk. And we're delighted that you have joined us, and we hope that you'll be back with us again next week on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. Thanks, Aaron.
I'm supposed to play some music right now, aren't I?
And Aaron was awesome.
Or talk about Matt Harvey.
Yeah, screw the Mets. Just want to get that in before we go. The Mets suck.
We'd also like to big him to Grom for his 100. Oh, she's breathtaking.